Right now, I mean, literally right now, millions of people are, they're stepping on the scale. They're looking down at this just massive drop in weight, and they are absolutely celebrating.
As they should be. I mean, it's a huge deal.
Right, exactly. On the surface, they completely should be. But what so many of them don't realize, and honestly, what the whole cultural conversation is just kind of completely glossing over right now, is that up to 50% of the weight they just lost is, well, it's the very tissue that's keeping their metabolism alive.
Yeah.
They're losing their muscle.
Which is just, it's a silent crisis inside this massive medical breakthrough, you know? Like, you see the numbers go down and it feels great, but underneath all that, you're just systematically dismantling your body's metabolic engine.
Yeah, it's wild. But hey, welcome to Radio BeFit, everyone. It is so good to have you here with us today.
It really is. So glad you're tuning in.
We know how loud and just completely chaotic the fitness world can be, and honestly, we're really just here to give you a place to catch your breath.
Yeah, a little oasis.
Exactly. So whether you're, squeezing this in during your commute, or maybe you're hiding out in your kitchen for like 5 minutes of peace while the house is just totally chaotic, we see you. We really do. I mean, we've all had those weeks where just the thought of figuring out a workout routine feels like trying to solve a calculus problem in the dark.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was literally just talking to a friend yesterday who she walked into a new gym, saw this machine that looked like it, I don't know, belonged on a spaceship or something.
Right, with all the pulleys and levers.
Yes. And she just turned around and walked right back to her car.
I totally get that. I've been there.
It's overwhelming. And when life is busy, adding like complex biology to the mix just feels like way too much.
It really does. So let's just turn the noise down today. We are pulling back the curtain on something that has completely taken over, well, everything. I mean, from the news cycle to neighborhood dinner parties.
Oh, it's everywhere.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're talking about the explosion of GLP-1 medications, the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, the Mounjaros of the world.
Yep.
But, and I want to be really clear about this, we are not going to debate the ethics here. And we definitely aren't here to judge anybody.
Not at all.
Our mission today is purely protective. We just want to be your cozy, highly informed guide to navigating all of this safely, because whether you're currently on these medications or maybe you're considering them, or you're just insanely fascinated by how they're basically rewriting human biology.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
So fascinating. But you really need to understand the trapdoor underneath that initial success.
And it's a trapdoor that catches, honestly, the most dedicated people. I mean, they do everything they think they're supposed to do, and they still end up feeling weaker and just more exhausted than when they started.
Which is exactly why we went so deep into the research for this one. And I actually want to mention right up front that all the core insights, the biological breakdowns and the specific protocols we're discussing today, they come straight from bfit.ai.
Which is such a great resource.
It really is. It's phenomenal because every single article there is expert reviewed. So you get all the hard science, but it's translated into these really doable plain language steps. It just completely removes the guesswork.
Yeah, and having that vetted foundation is so critical when you're dealing with things like endocrinology and pharmacology. I mean, there's just so many myths floating around right now about how these drugs actually interact with our metabolisms.
Oh, the misinformation is everywhere. So let's just get right into the biology of it. I want to start at the very beginning of the timeline, what we often hear people call the honeymoon phase.
Right, the golden window.
Exactly. So someone takes the medication and almost overnight, the psychological noise of hunger just totally evaporates.
Yeah.
I've had friends describe it as like a light switch turning off in their brain.
That's incredible.
Food goes from being this constant demanding thought to something they almost have to remind themselves to care about, and the scale reacts immediately.
Yeah, and that psychological relief, I mean, it cannot be overstated. For a lot of people, they are experiencing biological quiet for the very first time in their entire adult lives.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound.
It really is. And to understand why that happens, we have to look at the actual mechanisms. Specifically how the incretin system works. So GLP-1, which stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, is a hormone that our intestines naturally release when we eat.
Okay, so we all have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You all have it. And it does a few things. It tells the pancreas to release insulin, But
Right.
more importantly for our discussion today, it drastically slows down gastric emptying.
Okay, meaning the actual physical breakdown and movement of food out of the stomach just slows down to a crawl.
Exactly that. And simultaneously, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it binds to receptors in the hypothalamus, which is basically the brain's appetite control center.
Right.
And it artificially signals that you are constantly completely full. So you have this physical backup of food in the stomach, and it's paired with a neurological signal of absolute satiety.
So it essentially makes overeating practically impossible without feeling violently ill.
Yes.
So the calorie deficit people hit is just staggering, and the weight falls off. But let's fast forward to about week 6.
Okay.
The honeymoon phase starts to show some cracks. You look in the mirror, and yeah, your clothes are looser, which is great, but the shape underneath is changing in a way you really didn't expect.
Yeah, things look a little different.
Right, your arms are flatter, you go to pick up a heavy box, and your legs feel, I don't know, kind of hollow, and you're tired. But not just sleepy tired, it's like a deep cellular fatigue.
And this is exactly where the panic sets in for people.
Yeah.
Because the cultural narrative is always, lose weight, feel great.
Right.
But the biological reality of dropping that much weight that fast without any specific interventions is severe muscle catabolism. As you mentioned at the start, research shows that in many cases, up to half the weight lost on GLP-1s is lean body mass.
50%. I mean, I really want everyone listening to just pause for a second and absorb that number. If you lose 30 pounds, 15 of those pounds could be the very tissue you need to, to move around, to stay strong, to keep your bones healthy.
Yeah.
Why? Like, how does the body justify that? Why on earth would it eat its own functional tissue instead of just burning the fat?
Because your body doesn't operate on aesthetic goals. It doesn't care how you look in jeans.
Right.
It operates on this ancient evolutionary survival software. So this is a phenomenon known as adaptive thermogenesis. Your body is essentially a survival machine. When your calorie intake plummets, and it doesn't matter if it's because you took a GLP-1 agonist or because you're literally stranded in the wilderness with no food.
Right. The body doesn't know you bought a pill at the pharmacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just thinks the crops failed. It registers a severe energy crisis.
Wow.
And when an organism is in an energy crisis, it has to lower its overhead costs immediately, right? Just to stretch whatever fuel it has left.
Right.
Now, look at our two types of tissue. You have adipose tissue, which is fat, and it is metabolically inert.
Meaning it doesn't burn anything.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just stored energy. It requires almost 0 calories just to maintain itself. Skeletal muscle, however, is highly metabolically active. It demands constant calories, constant oxygen, and nutrients just to sit there and exist at rest.
Okay, this always makes me think of that personal finance analogy.
Oh, I love this one.
Right. Let's say your body is a household budget and the economy just totally crashed. Muscle is like the luxury sports car sitting in your driveway.
Yeah.
It requires premium gas, expensive insurance, constant maintenance. Fat, on the other hand, is just the cheap storage unit across town that basically pays for itself.
Exactly.
So when your income drops by 70% overnight, you don't sell the storage unit that's holding all your emergency supplies. You liquidate the expensive luxury car because you just can't afford the daily operating costs anymore.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. The body liquidates the expensive asset. It literally breaks down the skeletal muscle into amino acids, sends them to the liver, and converts them into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis.
Wow.
Yeah. It is literally cannibalizing your muscle to keep your brain and your vital organs functioning because you just aren't feeding it enough calories.
Which totally reshapes that entire debate I see online constantly. People argue endlessly, are GLP-1s a miracle cure or are they the ultimate cheat code? And based on the biology you just laid out, both sides are fundamentally missing the point.
Completely missing it.
The drug isn't directly burning the fat, but it also isn't directly melting the muscle.
Right. It is merely a tool. A tool that creates an effortless extreme calorie deficit. The extreme deficit is what triggers the muscle loss.
Oh.
But because the medication makes starvation feel so easy, people fall into a much deeper metabolic hole than they ever could just using traditional willpower.
And the consequence of that hole is what we call becoming skinny fat. You might hit your goal weight, but your metabolism is wrecked because you sold the sports car. Your daily calorie burn is permanently lower now. So the million-dollar question is, how do we intervene?
Right.
How do we force the body to keep the luxury car when the budget is slashed? And from our BFit.ai sources, the first major pillar of this intervention is what they call the protein paradox.
This is a massive paradox. Because to save the muscle, you need to consume high amounts of protein.
Right.
But how do you do that when you have delayed gastric emptying and the mere sight of a heavy meal makes you want to throw up?
This is where standard gym advice becomes, like, actively harmful. I see trainers online telling people on Wegovy, oh, just make sure you're eating a big steak or, a huge chicken breast at dinner.
Oh, no.
And you can just tell the trainer has absolutely no idea what the medication actually does to the gut.
Right. If you tell someone on week 3 of a GLP-1 to sit down and eat a 10-ounce chicken breast,
Yeah.
they're going to feel physically ill. The mechanical stretch receptors in their stomach are literally screaming that they are full. So what usually happens? The person tries, they fail, they feel guilty, and then they default to eating tiny amounts of whatever sounds palatable.
Which is usually simple carbs.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the muscle loss just accelerates.
So we have to throw the old playbook out entirely. We need to restructure the whole concept of mealtime.
First, we have to establish the biological target. To prevent catabolism in a steep deficit, your protein requirement actually goes up, not down. The clinical target is 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Okay, let's contextualize that for the listener really quick. If you weigh, say, 80 kilograms, you are aiming for roughly 100 to 130 grams of protein every single day. If you try to get that in 2 or 3 standard meals while on this medication, you're going to be completely miserable.
Which is exactly why we have to abandon the concept of 3 square meals. That whole societal structure is useless here. Instead, the strategy shift to continuous low-volume amino acid spiking. You need to consume 5 or 6 highly dense, tiny micro meals throughout the day.
Let's break down the actual daily schedule from the BFit.ai protocol, because when I first read this, it kind of blew my mind how practical it was.
It's very structured.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a diet. It looks like a medical feeding schedule, but in the best way possible.
Let's walk through it. The protocol starts right at 7:20 a.m.
Okay, so the first intervention is a 25-gram whey isolate protein shake, blended with just a little bit of fruit. And the reasoning here is brilliant. Whey isolate is liquid, it's low volume, and it digests extremely fast.
It completely bypasses the mechanical fullness issue. Liquids empty from the stomach much faster than solids, even when you're on a GLP-1.
Right.
So you are getting 25 grams of highly bioavailable amino acids into your bloodstream within an hour.
Right.
And that shuts down the overnight muscle catabolism, all without having to chew a single bite of food.
Amazing. Then 3 hours later, so at 10 a.m., the schedule calls for a small cup of Greek yogurt with a little drizzle of honey. That's another 15 grams of protein.
And notice the volume there. A small cup of Greek yogurt is, what, maybe 5 or 6 spoonfuls?
Barely anything.
Right. It is a tiny physical footprint in the stomach, but it delivers a potent dose of casein protein, which digests really slowly and keeps the muscle protected all the way until the afternoon.
Perfect. Then we get to 1:00 p.m., and this is what the protocol refers to as the only quote-unquote real meal of the day.
Yeah.
So maybe a piece of salmon, half a cup of rice, maybe some asparagus. That's about 25 grams of protein. But the key here is the portion size. We are talking about a plate the size of a salad plate, not a massive dinner platter.
Because the incretin hormones are so active, that small plate will trigger profound satiety. But since you've been trickling protein in all morning, you aren't relying on this one meal to hit your entire daily target.
Right, exactly. Then at 4:00 p.m., you grab a high-quality protein bar, another 20 grams. The friction here is 0. You don't have to cook. You don't have to prep anything. You just unwrap it and eat it.
And then at 6:00 p.m., a small portion of tofu or maybe some sliced chicken breast with a few noodles, that's another 25 grams.
And finally, there's this optional touch point at 8:00 p.m. if you still need to hit your macros, like a half cup of cottage cheese for another 15 grams. If you follow that map, you just consumed around 125 grams of protein.
Which is fantastic.
You successfully shielded your muscle tissue for the entire 24-hour cycle, and you never once had to gorge yourself.
But I know there's an immediate objection to this. People here eat 6 times a day, and they instantly think of that, Tupperware-carrying bodybuilder aesthetic.
Oh, absolutely. If I'm listening to this and my primary symptom is a total lack of appetite, managing 6 micro meals sounds exhausting. It sounds like my entire day revolves around just forcing food down my throat.
And it's a completely valid reaction. But we really have to reframe what eating means in this specific context. You are no longer eating for pleasure or to soothe stress or even to satisfy hunger. You are eating as a targeted biological prescription.
Oh, I love that phrasing, a biological prescription.
Think of it like taking a critical daily supplement. You don't take a vitamin D pill because you have a deep, burning craving for it, right?
Right. To
You
know.
take it because it maintains your bone density. These micro meals are structural support. And because the volume is so drastically reduced, I mean, we are talking about a few sips of a shake or a few bites of yogurt, it really shouldn't trigger the psychological resistance or the physical discomfort of a large meal.
And the protocol gives you permission to be realistic, too. The guideline is to aim for 80 to 85% whole foods, but use supplements for the rest, entirely guilt-free.
Yes, please.
Right. If chewing solid food is just way too much on a random Tuesday afternoon, drink a clear whey protein water. Don't let the pursuit of a perfect, organic, farm-to-table diet stop you from getting the raw amino acids your body desperately needs.
Exactly.
The liver does not care if the amino acids came from grass-fed beef or a convenient shake. It just needs the building blocks.
That permission is vital. Friction is the absolute enemy of consistency. You have to reduce the friction by any means necessary. And I should add, if you're listening and trying to furiously write down this schedule while you're driving or walking the dog, don't worry.
Don't crash your car.
Please don't. This exact timeline, the protein breakdown, and the whole philosophy behind it are all detailed in the free expert-reviewed articles on bfit.ai. You can just pull it up later and use it to build your grocery list.
It is incredibly handy to have it all laid out there.
Oh, sure.
So, okay, we've solved the chemical side of the equation. The protein provides the bricks to rebuild the house. But here's the catch. Having a pile of muck sitting in your driveway doesn't magically build a house.
Nope.
You have to give your body a compelling reason to hire the construction crew.
To go back to your earlier analogy, protein is the premium gas, but you still have to actually turn the key in the ignition to prove you are using the luxury car.
Exactly. And that ignition is strength training. But, and this is a massive flashing neon warning sign, the type of strength training required on a GLP-1 is completely fundamentally different from what the fitness industry usually preaches.
If you take a traditional hyper-aggressive bodybuilding or boot camp approach and try to apply it to a body running on a GLP-1 calorie deficit, you will accelerate the very muscle loss you're trying to prevent.
Wow.
You will crash spectacularly.
I want to spend some real time on this because this is where I see the most confusion. People think, okay, I'm losing muscle, I need to go to the gym and absolutely destroy myself to build it back. Why is that the worst possible instinct?
Because you have to distinguish between training to build muscle and training to preserve muscle. Normal strength programs assume you are in a caloric surplus, or at least maintenance.
Right, they assume you're fueled up.
Exactly. They assume you have robust glycogen stores and a fully recovered nervous system. When you train hard, you create micro tears in the muscle fibers. Your body then uses excess calories and protein to repair those tears, making the muscle bigger and stronger.
But on a GLP-1, you don't have excess calories.
You have almost no excess calories. You are in a profound energy deficit. Your sympathetic nervous system is already heavily taxed by the rapid weight loss and the pharmacological intervention itself. If you go into the gym and do a 60-minute, high-volume muscle shredding workout, you create a massive repair demand that your body literally cannot fulfill.
You are writing a biological check that your metabolism cannot cash.
Perfectly stated. So the body, desperate for energy to repair this massive trauma you just inflicted on it, has to pull from other sources. It increases cortisol levels, which breaks down even more muscle tissue into glucose to survive the stress. You leave the gym weaker and smaller.
Man. So if the goal isn't to break the muscle down to build it up, what is the actual goal of lifting weights in this phase?
The sole objective is neurological signaling. You are sending a localized, undeniable message to your central nervous system that says, hey, we are actively using this specific tissue for survival. Do not liquidate it.
It's a retention signal. Keep this asset.
Yes.
So how do we send that signal without triggering that whole stress cascade?
Sure.
The protocol lays out very specific parameters. First, frequency, 3 to 4 times a week.
Yes. If you lift fewer than 3 times a week, the preservation signal just isn't frequent enough to override the starvation signal. The body will default back to liquidating the muscle. But if you lift more than 4 times, you run out of recovery capacity.
Okay, next parameter, intensity. And this is the one that really challenges our gym culture egos. The protocol explicitly says, do not train to failure.
Training to failure is when you lift a weight until you physically cannot complete another repetition. It is the gold standard for muscle hypertrophy, meaning growth. But remember, we aren't growing. We are preserving. Going to failure causes severe mechanical damage to the fiber. By stopping 2 or 3 repetitions before you fail, what we call leaving reps in the reserve, you get all the neurological signaling benefits without the massive physiological damage.
You stimulate, but you do not annihilate. I
Exactly.
love that. Then we get to the movement selection. The foundation of this protocol is compound lifts, squats, deadlifts, chest presses, rows, and overhead presses. Now, I've heard people ask, why can't I just use the seated machines? Why can't I just do some bicep curls and leg extensions? Why are compound movements non-negotiable here?
It all comes down to systemic efficiency. A compound movement is any exercise that requires multiple joints and multiple large muscle groups to work in unison.
Give me an example of the mechanics there.
So take the barbell squat, or even a heavy dumbbell goblet squat. You aren't just pushing with your quadriceps. To keep your torso upright, your entire core musculature has to fire. Your spinal erectors and your back are engaged. Your glutes and hamstrings are stabilizing the descent. You are recruiting hundreds of thousands of motor units across your entire body simultaneously.
The signal is massive.
It is a massive systemic retention signal. Now compare that to a bicep curl. A curl only engages the small muscle group on the front of the arm.
Right, just the bicep.
Exactly. The signal is weak and localized. When you are fatigued and running on low calories, you just don't have the energy to spend an hour isolating every single small muscle. You have to get in, hit the major systems with compound lifts, send the loudest possible signal, and get out.
Let's paint a picture of what this actually looks like for the listener, because the sample routine in the BFit.ai protocol is surprisingly minimal. It's designed to be completed in about 30 minutes.
It's very quick.
Yeah, here is the breakdown. You start with squats, just 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps. Then a chest press, 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps, followed by a row, 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps. Then an overhead press, 2 sets of 6 to 8 reps. And finally, a single leg deadlift, 2 sets of 5 to 6 reps on each leg. That is the entire session.
It is surgical. You hit the anterior chain, the posterior chain, the upper push, and the upper pull. Every major muscle group is stimulated.
And for anyone intimidated by those terms, you do not need an expensive trainer for this. You don't need to join a hardcore powerlifting gym. You can do these with dumbbells in your living room or at a basic commercial gym. There are thousands of free tutorials online that break the form down perfectly.
Absolutely.
But I have to be honest, looking at that routine and knowing you are leaving reps in the tank, it sounds almost anticlimactic.
It absolutely feels anticlimactic. And that is a huge psychological barrier for people.
Right. Because we have been deeply conditioned to believe that a workout only counts if you are a sweaty, exhausted mess at the end of it. If you aren't collapsing on the floor, you didn't work hard enough. If you do this 30-minute protocol, you might not even break a heavy sweat.
Which means you executed it perfectly. We really have to decouple the feeling of exhaustion from the biological result. Exhaustion is just a measure of stress. It is not a measure of adaptation.
That's a great way to put it.
Your job right now is preservation. If you leave the gym feeling completely wrecked, you failed the assignment. You dumped way too much stress into a system that is already struggling to cope.
It takes a lot of maturity to walk out of the gym feeling like you could have done more, and knowing that stopping was actually the medically correct choice.
It really does. But understanding the biology of why you are stopping makes it so much easier to accept.
So that brings up a really interesting friction point. If the lifting is kept moderate and short, and I am on this medication to lose fat, shouldn't I use the rest of my energy to do a ton of cardio? Right. Shouldn't I be doing high-intensity interval training or running on the treadmill for an hour a day to maximize the fat burn during this honeymoon phase?
That is the most common mistake made on GLP-1s, and the answer from the clinical research is a definitive, absolute no.
I am so glad we are talking about this. Why is heavy cardio a bad idea here?
Because of a concept in endocrinology called allostatic load, which is essentially the cumulative wear and tear on your body from stress. I like to explain it using the concept of a stress bucket.
Okay, let's look at the bucket.
Your central nervous system doesn't differentiate between good stress and bad stress.
Yeah.
It just sees demand. The GLP-1 medication itself alters your neurochemistry that goes in the bucket.
Right.
The massive 1,000 calorie a day deficit you're in is a profound survival stressor that takes up half the bucket right there. The 30 minutes of compound lifting we just discussed that goes in the bucket.
So the bucket is already brimming at the top.
Exactly. Now, if you decide to jump into a 45-minute HII class or go for a massive, exhausting run, you are dumping a gallon of water into a bucket that is already full. It overflows.
And what does that overflow look like on a cellular level?
It triggers a massive release of cortisol, which is the body's primary stress hormone. Chronic elevation of cortisol in a calorie deficit is just a metabolic nightmare. Cortisol specifically targets type 2 muscle fibers for breakdown.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it accelerates that gluconeogenesis process we talked about earlier. So because you don't have enough blood glucose from food to fuel your run, the cortisol breaks down your muscle tissue to power your cardio session.
Wait, so you are literally burning your own muscle to fuel the run that you are doing to try and look better?
Yes, it is entirely counterproductive. You are actively accelerating the very problem we're trying to stop.
That is wild. It's like one step forward, three steps back. So what is the cardiovascular prescription then? Because we obviously still need to take care of our hearts.
The prescription is low-intensity, steady-state movement. The absolute best tool you have is walking. The goal is to accumulate 6,000 to 10,000 steps over the course of the day.
Why does walking bypass the stress bucket?
Because it is evolutionarily normal.
Mm.
Low-intensity walking utilizes the aerobic energy system, primarily burning free fatty acids for fuel, rather than demanding immediate glucose. It doesn't spike cortisol. In fact, it actually lowers sympathetic nervous system tone.
Wow.
Yeah, it acts as an active recovery mechanism, pumping blood and nutrients to the muscles you stimulated during your lifting sessions without causing further breakdown.
It is gentle movement that actually honors the state your body is in. And paired with that, the sources are incredibly emphatic about recovery, specifically sleep.
Sleep is the foundation that everything else rests on. If you are doing the lifting and eating the protein, but you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, the body simply cannot execute the preservation software. The majority of muscle repair, hormone balancing, and fat oxidation occurs during deep, slow-wave sleep. You must prioritize 7 to 9 hours.
It's not a luxury. It is the environment where the actual body recomposition happens. You know, before we move into the exact timeline of what to expect over the next 6 months, because I think mapping that out is so important, I just want to take a quick second here.
Sure.
If you are finding this deep dive helpful, if it is clearing up some of the confusion or giving you a sense of direction, we would absolutely love it if you hit like or leave a comment wherever you're listening. It really helps us get better at what we do. And honestly, that support is heartwarming. It is a genuine connection, and it's what keeps us going and motivates us to keep creating these episodes for you.
It really is. Reading how this information impacts your daily routines is why we do this.
Okay, let's talk about the timeline, because one of the most destabilizing things about changing your body is just not knowing what is normal. If you don't know what is supposed to happen, the moment your progress slows down, you panic and do something drastic. So let's map out exactly what a listener will experience week by week.
Having this map prevents so much self-sabotage. We break the timeline down into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is weeks 1 through 4.
Right, the honeymoon phase we mentioned earlier. What is physically happening here?
This is the period of rapid loss.
Hmm.
It is very common to see 8 to 12 pounds drop in the first month. But we need to be scientifically honest about what that weight actually is. The vast majority of it is not adipose tissue. It is water and glycogen. Let's explain glycogen really quickly because that's a term thrown around a lot.
Glycogen is simply the stored form of carbohydrates. Your body stores it primarily in your skeletal muscles and liver to use for immediate energy. But here's the critical part. Every single gram of glycogen is bound to roughly 3 to 4 grams of water.
So when the medication stops you from eating,
When your carbohydrate intake plummets, your body immediately taps into those glycogen stores to keep functioning. As it burns the glycogen, it releases all the attached water. You literally flush it out of your system. So the scale drops precipitously, but your actual tissue composition hasn't changed dramatically yet. Which explains why your strength in the gym usually feels completely fine during the first month. You haven't degraded the muscle fiber yet. You've basically just wrung the sponge dry.
exactly.
But then we cross into phase 2, weeks 5 through 12. The BFit.ai protocol labels this the danger zone.
Yeah, and is aptly named because by week 5, the water weight is gone. The easy drop is over. Now, the weight loss continues at a very real tissue-based rate of about 2 to 3 pounds per week.
And this is where the body's energy budget is pushed to the absolute brink.
Yes,
Aha.
this is the crucible. If you have ignored everything we've talked about today, if you aren't doing the 30-minute compound lifts, if you aren't doing the microprotein meals, this is the window where the muscle loss becomes catastrophic. The body realizes the famine is real and begins wholesale liquidation of the luxury car.
This is the phase where you try to carry a heavy bag of dog food from the car or pick up a toddler and you suddenly realize, Wow, I'm noticeably weaker than I was a month ago.
The fatigue is bone deep. The physical shape of the arm loses its density. It's a very distinct softening effect.
But if you are following the protocol, if you are sending that biological text message with squats and chest presses and supplying the amino acids, what happens in the danger zone?
It is a completely different physiological experience.
Yeah.
You still lose the 2 to 3 pounds a week, but your body is biochemically forced to spare the muscle and pull that massive energy requirement straight from the fat stores. You will likely still feel a bit tired. I mean, you are in a deficit, after all, but your physical strength remains intact. You notice your clothes fit differently, but the tissue underneath feels firm.
Which brings us to the third phase, the critical turning point, weeks 13 to 24.
This is where the psychological battle really begins, because between months 3 and 6, the rapid weight loss naturally, inevitably slows down. It will likely drop to a much more gradual 1.5 to 2 pounds a week.
And I want to jump in and add a massive dose of reassurance here. It is so completely normal to step on the scale at week 14, see that it only moved half a pound, and immediately assume the medication has stopped working.
Oh, it happens all the time.
The instinct is to panic, right? You want to call your doctor to increase the dose or cut your calories even further, but that slowdown is not a failure. It is actually a sign of a healthy, stabilizing metabolism.
It is biological reality.
Yeah.
As your body mass decreases, your total daily energy expenditure decreases. It takes fewer calories to move a smaller body around. A 1.5 pound per week loss after 3 months is phenomenally successful, and more importantly, it's sustainable.
And this is where the two paths diverge entirely. Let's look at the fork in the road at 6 months.
If you have been doing the work, the protein, the lifts, the sleep at week 24, the mirror reflects a total transformation. You have executed a true body recomposition, you retained your lean mass, dropped significant fat, and protected your metabolic engine.
And if you just relied on the drug and starved yourself.
At week 24, you are the textbook definition of skinny fat. You weigh significantly less, but your body fat percentage might actually be higher relative to your overall mass because you lost so much muscle. Your resting metabolic rate has plummeted.
Which sets up the most dangerous scenario of all and brings us to the end game. Because let's be incredibly real about this landscape. These medications, for the vast majority of people, they are not a forever solution.
They're often just a temporary window.
Exactly. The reasons are endless. The out-of-pocket costs are astronomical, often over $1,000 a month. Insurance companies are constantly changing coverage criteria. Some people have to stop due to gastrointestinal side effects. Or, very commonly, the body eventually develops tolerance, the gastric emptying speeds back up, and the appetite suppression wanes even on the maximum dose.
Right.
The window closes. What happens to the body when the GLP-1 clears the system?
This is the data point that terrifies endocrinologists.
Yeah.
If you have treated the medication as the entire solution and you haven't built the underlying habits, the weight regain is practically inevitable, and the speed at which it returns is staggering.
Break down the mechanics of that regain. Why is it so aggressive?
First, you have the neurological rebound. The artificial satiety signal disappears. The incretin hormones return to baseline. Your natural hunger cues, driven by hormones like ghrelin, return often with a compensatory vengeance. The brain recognizes the famine is over and literally screams at you to eat.
And because you haven't practiced any new behaviors, because you simply weren't hungry for 6 months, you immediately revert to your old dietary patterns.
But here is the true tragedy. You are returning to your old diet with a fundamentally damaged metabolism. Remember, you lost 30 pounds, but 15 of those were muscle. Your resting metabolic rate, the calories you burn just keeping the lights on, is significantly lower than it was before you ever started the drug.
So a meal that used to maintain your weight before the medication is now a massive caloric surplus.
Precisely. You have a heightened appetite paired with a suppressed metabolism. The body shuttles all those returning calories directly into fat storage to protect against the next perceived famine. You regain the weight, but you regain it entirely as fat. You end up at a worse metabolic and structural state than on day one.
That is the trapdoor. You fall through and you land deeper in the hole. This entire biological sequence proves why relying solely on the pharmacology is a losing game. The medication is not a miracle, and it is not a moral failing. It is a powerful, temporary scaffolding.
I think that is the most constructive way to view it.
The source material has a beautiful framing for this. It suggests looking at the medication-induced lack of hunger as a quiet window. For years, maybe decades, the noise of hunger and cravings in your brain has been deafening.
Yeah.
It is incredibly difficult to focus on meal prep or learning how to deadlift when your biology is constantly screaming at you to seek out high-calorie foods to soothe stress. The GLP-1 turns that volume dial all the way down to a whisper.
And the question becomes, what do you do with that quiet? Do you just passively enjoy the silence? Or do you use the quiet to finally concentrate on building the foundation?
You use the window to practice eating adequate protein without fighting constant cravings. You use the window to establish a 3-day-a-week lifting routine without feeling totally depleted. You are pouring a concrete foundation of habits.
Because eventually, the scaffolding comes down, medication stops. But if you pour the concrete, the house stands on its own. Your metabolism is preserved, you know exactly how to train, and you know how to structure your meals.
You know, we've covered so much ground today, from the gut hormones to the gym floor, and this is exactly why we rely on platforms like BeFit.ai. Knowledge really is your best personal trainer. We try to share everything you need to make fitness and wellness click, but if you want to revisit the exact science of adaptive thermogenesis or print out that micromeal schedule we discussed, there are free articles over there that make all this stuff incredibly clear and doable. It is just a fantastic expert-reviewed resource to keep in your back pocket.
It removes the anxiety of having to memorize a podcast.
Totally. So let's wrap this up and crystallize it for the listener. What is the fundamental takeaway for someone navigating this landscape?
The summary is this. Do not let the medication work alone. The drug manages the calorie deficit. It is your responsibility to manage the tissue preservation. Abandon the idea of 3 large meals and transition to small, frequent, protein-dense touch points. Lift weights moderately, avoiding failure, focusing on compound movements to signal the body to keep your muscle. Skip the exhausting cardio and prioritize walking and sleep to keep your stress bucket empty. View this entire experience not as a passive fix, but as a protected window of time to build the metabolic and behavioral foundation you will rely on for the rest of your life.
That is such an empowering perspective. It gives the control back to you, the listener. And please, if you are feeling overwhelmed, remember that you don't have to overhaul your entire life tomorrow morning. Taking just one small step, maybe it's buying a pack of high-quality protein shakes or watching a 2-minute video on how to do a proper goblet squat, is perfectly enough for today. Give yourself some grace.
Small, imperfect actions taken consistently will always outperform perfect actions taken rarely.
Absolutely. All right, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We spent the last hour talking about how GLP-1 medications are ultimately a tool to quiet the deafening noise of physical hunger, giving you the mental bandwidth to finally focus on building healthy habits. So it makes you wonder, what other noise in your daily life could you turn down right now? What distractions, what endless scrolling, what unnecessary obligations could you quiet down just to give yourself the mental space to build the routines you actually want?
That is a brilliant question. Recognizing the noise is the only way to find the quiet.
It really is. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with us today on Radio BeFit. This has been such an incredible conversation.
It really has. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves out there.
We will catch you on the next deep dive.